Hey, Randy, how are you?
Doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm excited to be here as always. Excuse me. I'm back. Had to get me something to drink here. Got a frog in my throat tonight. Randy, I need to acknowledge you in front of the group, but I wanted to say I really like that you shared your revamped schedule with your administration and that y'all are kind of talking back and forth on that, looking at next year's schedule. I like that. I mean, that's the whole point of this is to, you have common language and and information and ideas and knowledge now, and you can start learning from them because you're kind of up to speed on what they know. Um, and it's a lot easier to engage in conversations about things if than conversations about I don't know anything, teach me. They don't have time to do that. But once you get some institutional knowledge, you can start that give and take back and forth, and it changes not only your lens but their lens of you as well.
Oh, yes, sir. I learned quickly that really the worst thing they could say is no. You
That's
know,
right.
and like I'd rather live with a no than I wonder kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make them tell you to go home or leave them alone. Um, you'll learn 10 times as much from them as you ever will from me or a book because they live it every day, and you're able to see it in context with them as well. Um, and so that's the notion of your clinical experience is don't spend it all doing bus duty. Damn, that's a waste of
Oh,
time.
yes, sir.
Spend it talking with them, learning stuff, doing things that get you prepared. As I've told you, bus duty just don't get run over and wear a long coat in the wintertime. Other than that, not a lot to learn, but there's a lot to learn about a lot of other stuff that'll jump up and get you. And so, and it's not a bad idea to be seen as a benefit or a an asset, with ideas and things that you can share with them. And when students ask questions, um, it reminds us sometimes as people out in the field of things that maybe we had forgotten or overlooked or didn't have time to get around to. So, you know, I had a principal intern all year because he was a principal fellow from UNC Charlotte, Pedro Briceño. And I love Pedro. And I tell you, Pedro reminded me of, I was high school principal, old and jaded by then, thought I knew it all. But I tell you, it was good to have Pedro. It really was. You learn a lot from interns if you're willing to work with them. Let's see. So welcome back, everybody. Let's look at our weekly schedule to get us kicked off here. I've got 7 o'clock. Got a lot to cover. I probably won't get to cyberbullying. I think I've pulled that out separately for next week. And technology, I've kind of put that in a new package. And so we won't talk about bullying or cyberbullying tonight, and that'll help us with our time. As much as we've got to cover tonight, let me see. Yep, there's the document I'm looking for. So there's the star of the show. The stars for last week on the case study were Liz's group. And I'll remind everybody, I just wrote it down to remind everybody, I'll read who that is. Let me make sure I don't I don't want to slide anybody here. Let me go back up here to course overview. So Liz's group is Jasmine, Elizabeth, Catherine, and Quintina. So congratulations on the star of the show last week. Now, everybody did a great job. But you know, I always try to have a star of the week on everything, and I liked their presentation. It was really good, but I liked everybody's, and so they were the stars of the week. You don't get anything extra, but it's important to recognize people who do good work. All right, and so this week we're talking about students' rights, discipline, due process, search and seizure. You had two observed student due process. The answer to that one is on due process, whether it's discipline EC, is that you observe federal and state law. As was pointed out in one of the posts from Brandon, MTSS is state law now. EC is federal law. And if you don't follow the due process on intervention kids or EC kids, you violated due process. That was a good catch by Brandon. So due process is not just discipline. It's the rights that kids have under MTSS at the state level for intervention and what EC kids. Now, one of the things that's really important to remember about MTSS, if you can't remember this, write it down. This is so important. The state considers your intervention team, MTSS, RTI, whatever you want to call it, your school, a school-based committee, SBC. What is a school-based committee? That means the principal's responsible. That's what it means. That means if something goes bad in EC, they go back to the EC director and your CT compliance technician or your chair or whatever. And then they may eventually roll around to you if you're the one that did something stupid. But if you're out of compliance and those kinds of things and IEPs aren't being met, usually the EC department takes the hit. If you don't fulfill MTSS and intervention, that's the principal's role. That's the school-based committee. That means you're legally responsible according to the state. Got to remember that. So due process extends to MTSS and EC as well. Got to remember that. And so quickly, I put a little quick and dirty in your under tonight about what is due process. Process me announced in the discipline manual, code of conduct, or the EC handbook, or whatever. You got to tell people what they're supposed to get. You got to tell them that. Again, that's the substantive due process. It must be announced. That's the substantive piece. Right to be informed of the charges against them, right to be informed of placement. Again, you can substitute EC and MTSS here. Right to hear evidence, witness, right to respond to charges, right to present witness, not to be treated arbitrarily or capriciously. And then procedural is, did we follow what we said we would do? So that's what you should have seen by looking at due process last week. Now, when you talk to the AP about discipline, you'll hear all kinds of things. Generally, that falls under two things, and both of them trouble me. And I'll stop my share for a minute. Talk about that. It really bothers me when I hear administrators say, well, I'm worried about that, that we're somewhat fair across the board. Well, that's not the kids. The kid can't fix that. That's on you to meet every week and look at, talk to one another, but more importantly, run your reports out of Power School. All right, here's the similar incidents that happened in Power School. Here's the consequences they got. Does it look equitable? If it doesn't, that's on you. That's a quick fix week by week. That's not one of them. We'll look at that at the end of the year and hope it comes out right. You can do that every Friday. So I worry when school administrators say, I hope we're all, being fairly equitable or consistency. That ain't a hope, folks. That's a plan. Every Friday at the administrative meeting, we run those reports. It takes that long. And we can look and see if we're being equitable across the board, that we're being fairly consistent. That's not a hope. If you're hoping on that, you're going to be in trouble. You better be planning for that. And that's an easy one to fix. So easy. The second one that I hear all the time that worries me about APs especially is time. Oh, it takes too much time. Time. Slow down. Get it right. You get it wrong, it won't go well for you. Get behind. So under tonight on not reporting. This is, and these three folks, I mean, they could be on my screen right now, me looking at them. I want you to look at this picture. Tell me they don't look like y'all. Let me share my screen. And they just got behind processing discipline, trying to get in a hurry, wanting to go fast, had other things they wanted to do. That's what they said in court. By the way, they all got reassigned and then fired during the case. And so let me share my screen. I'll pull this one up. Tell me they don't look like y'all. The fella I'm telling you, that fella on the left, if he had Josh's haircut, that could be Josh sitting right there. I think he's 40-ish. That could be him right there. Liz, that's you in the middle. I'm telling you. And these three folks, unfortunately, good young people, early on, first year in their career, trying to go fast, thinking that not understanding due process means go slow. All three of them were beginners, first time APs, processing discipline too fast, not reporting, just going back to the room kind of thing, not putting incidents in. Got relieved of duties on suspension, got moved, went to suspension, all three fired. So if you don't have time to process discipline as an AP, then you don't have time to be an AP. That's kind of your gig. That's kind of your gig. So those things, but I hear other things, and that I like it when the AP say, I want to make sure that we're doing restorative justice rather than just trying to punish them. So that's hopefully what you heard this week. So here's the things that caught my eye this week, if I see any of you on the screen. So Alicia asked, is the principal responsible for the AP's actions in data collection? Putting in there. Absolutely. Says so in the manual. Regardless who inputs the data, the principal is ultimately responsible. Absolutely. So every Friday, when I had that principals meeting every Friday from my administrative team, are you caught up on your referrals? Are you sticking to the 24, 48, 24 if it's a reportable offense, 48 to have it in there if it's just a UB? Are you sticking to guidelines? Let's do a printout. Let's look to see that we're even. I kind of know what happened in that case. How'd you report it? You're not under-reporting on us, are you, over here? That kind of thing. Kristen talked about an event that she was involved with. That their school got written statements throughout the investigation, and it's just like they're supposed to. But one of the things that she talked about that she, really surprised her is that the parents weren't very nice people. That should not be a surprise. Parents understand, parents aren't advocates for education or schools. Parents are advocates for their children. And when you understand that function, then you understand that you can expect anything from them at any time. And nothing they do should ever surprise you. Even parents you thought you knew. They are advocates for their children, period. End of story. There's no caveat. There's no appendices. They're only advocates for their children. If you understand that, you'll be okay. Yeah. Shaw was talking about you got to put your evidence in Power School, otherwise it doesn't exist. Adrian talked about parents agreeing to whatever happens in the disciplinary process. That's not part of the process. Now, it is in IEPs for that due process. That's what that's the juxtaposition I wanted to point out. And when you do your IEP visit to an IEP, when you sit in on an IEP team meeting, yes, parent participation and acquiescence or agreement is a part of that process, regardless of who does the paperwork. I can't tell you the number of times I've been sitting in IEP meetings and the staff gets all bent out of shape because they did all the work and the paperwork and the parent just says no. like they're obligated to go along with that. They're not. Parent agreement is a part of the IEP process because they're a team member. However, when you're doing due process for a child, parents agreeing with you is not part of that process. We do not have to have their acquiescence when we assign discipline. And they can appeal your decision to the principal and the principal's decision to the superintendent's decision to the board, and the board's decision to civil court. It's the way it goes. But don't get in that habit of negotiating discipline with parents like you have to with IEPs. That's a fool's errand. Nothing that you do will ever make them happy. So go by the code of conduct. Do the mitigating factors if it's the first time, second time, third time, that kind of thing. As I said earlier, Randy, with his OMA 3, he shared his revised schedule with his administration and have entered into a conversation with them, and hopefully that will be an entree to him to be this spring, summer involved with building the master schedule for another year to see how the process goes. That's a good learning experience. That's very good. Josh talked about 3 things: communication, the process, and the execution. I like that, and when he talked about due process. Again, Brandon reminded us that MTSS is state law and EC is federal. LaShonda talked about the difference between elementary and secondary. That's true. Talked about teachers discipline kids in front of others, which considered to be excessive punishment. That is exactly right. Tanya talked about heightened awareness to these kind of things. How you treat kids in due process. You need to take them to the office and process them, not do it in front of the other kids. Kizzy made a good point that a lot of times teachers don't understand the terminology the jargon that we use as administrators, that we need to educate our teachers on what these different things mean, and get them up to speed on definition of terms. I like that. That's a good catch, Kizzy. That's one of the things that when we do the interview in town hall, that I'll remind you of on the second round of interviews. When you do the group interviews that has parents and lay people like community members, you can't use acronyms. You can't use metaphor and acronyms and things that we use every day, jargon, because they'll just be lost. And so that's a good reminder that sometimes teachers don't know it all either, and that that second round of interviews is teachers, parents, and community members. And when you go in and start talking RTI, MTSS, PBIS, all these different things, a lot of them are just sitting there, or you're talking EVOS and they don't understand growth versus proficiency. You got to bring your teachers along in this process as well. That's a good catch. Jasmine reminded us that EC due process again. That that we have to be comprehensive, making sure that we're doing least restrictive on that. Again, that's due process as well. Melody made a good point. I think she's at the other group. One of the things that I really liked about Melody said is, when you get started doing this, as I've told you before, there is no major, there is no minor. There's just incidents. We categorize them as PDs, ROs, but you got to report them all. But this notion of we'll handle or we'll edit the minor ones out, put them in, educator handbook, and surprise, surprise, they don't ever make it to Power School. We start editing them out, handling things in house. Guess what? Where do you stop? And pretty soon you're not processing anybody, because hey, you got to top yourself. So what happens is we run your statisticals for your school, and you're averaging X number of incidents and X number of in schools, X number of out school days on a monthly basis, and all of a sudden you start doing a little bit better because you start shading your numbers a little bit, or you exceeded the state or the district average on any of those, and you had to write an addendum to your school improvement plan. You do know that if you exceed the district or state average on out of school suspensions or disciplinary referrals, you have to write an addendum to your school improvement plans, called your school safety plan, on what you're going to do to get those numbers down under that acceptable level. Okay. Well, what happens is if you don't do it by, increasing your supervision, doing all the things you're supposed to, if you just start cutting the numbers, you just have to keep on cutting them, keep on cutting them, keep them. Pretty soon, it's a revolving door. The kids no more leave the room for a disciplinary referral than they're right back. Do you think that affects the culture of your building? Oh, my Lord. More than anything, negatively, more than anything else that I can think of, is if you don't process discipline because you're trying to get those numbers down, and you become a victim of your own success on those numbers. If you be smart enough to get them down underneath the thresholds and then kind of hold them constant, but no, we never do that. We just cheat. We want, a little. If a little's good, a lot's better. That's the way it always works. And then pretty soon you aren't processing anybody, and your teachers, it never goes well. Then you pay the price at teacher working condition or parent or teacher survey time in South Carolina. Then you pay the price. Then you get killed on the back end. Now, if you don't remember anything else I ever said about culture, remember this: culture eats strategy for breakfast every morning. You can't change culture, folks. Culture is earned. You can't just say, we're going to do something different tomorrow. So everybody, clean slate. That's not the way culture works. If you have a culture of hiding things, it spreads to everything else. And pretty soon teachers know that they're out there by themselves. And they kill you on the survey, and B, they leave. You better understand that. Pretty soon you'll be by yourself. Tamla, Randy talked about discipline being fair, have to slow down, like that a lot. Yeah, due process is not the place in the administrative day to cut your time, as I talked to you about. When we get to cyberbullying next week, I do want to make this point. Larry was surprised by parents as well. Don't be, Larry. They're turds. And then cyberbullying, I do want to mention this, even though we'll cover it in depth next week. Cyberbullying law is real clear. It doesn't matter where it happened. It doesn't matter if it happened at school. It doesn't matter if it happened on a school device. None of that matters. So the administrator that says, well, we don't know where it happened, or they're just lying. Either that or they're idiots. They can't read the law. The law is very clear. If it affects the educational environment, then you have to deal with it. Now, if a parent comes in and reports it to you, would you not say that would be the metric for affecting the educational environment? Well, of course it would be. So if a parent comes in and reports that somebody's cyberbullying their child, you got to deal with it. You don't ask, well, what did they use a school computer, or did it happen during the school? It does not matter. Let me read the law to you. I can't tell you the number of people. Okay, South Carolina has a similar law. This is General Statute 115C 40715. Creates or is certain to create a hostile environment by substantially interfering with or impairing a student's educational performance, opportunities, and benefits. That means you have to deal with it. You have to deal with it. Don't start that business about, I don't know where it happened. We can't pin it down. We don't know what computer. Just stop it. Deal with it. First thing you do, pick up your radio, call your SRO. Start with your SRO. They have warrant powers that you don't have. Sometimes you need that warrant power. I told you the story. There in the community I live in, Lake Norman. AP that I had trained saw a bunch of kids, boys clustering around a cell phone. Went over to see what it was. It was naked pictures of naked girls from the middle school. This boy was doing bad things. He was pressuring these girls, blackmailing them in. He was 18. He's still in prison, by the way. But, that phone, they had to get a warrant, got the pictures on the phone. That's an extreme case, but you need to involve law enforcement with it. So sometimes there's other adults involved. Sometimes you need to to take a phone, subpoena phone records or internet, those kinds of things. Always start with your resource officer, and then go handle your business. Don't pretend like it's not your problem. It is your problem. It impacts the educational environment. It's on you. All right. So let's talk about discipline. You need to get the administrators in your building to let you see the discipline module in Power School. It's much different than the teacher module. It's much more involved. It's much more in depth. Now, when I took over that area in CMS, it's one of my jobs. I forget what level I was. I think I was assistant superintendent at that time. And I took over that. We had a training group, and I had a handbook built for them so that they could train administrators. We brought them into Staff Development Center over in the Cherry neighborhood off West Boulevard, and right down from the Bojangles. And we would train them over there. And then I eventually took over the training when we got everybody caught up. And so I had a manual built. Now, I can't show you a Power School manual, but thankfully, NCWise was the version right before Power School. I can show you the manual so that you can see how involved Power School is. So let me share my screen, and I'll pull up this manual that I had made right here. So it's basically the same thing, but here's what it looks like. As you can see right here, there's my name. I'm the one that had it made. My name's on this page somewhere. There it is, but anyway. And so it goes through all the things that have to be reported, and you do all that. That comes out of the disciplinary data manual, but it gives you a screen by screen shot of what you have to do. Power School looks very similar because this became Power School, about what you have to do to enter all your incidents in, and understanding that you got to go through 3 screens to get to that back screen every time. And especially if you're going to print any kind of a disciplinary notice, suspension letter, or whatever, you got to put it in all 3. So I've had people just put it in the front one thinking, if I don't put it all the way in, it won't show up and look like I put it in. No, don't do dumb things like that. But it gives you all the different types, the screens, what, you need to learn what needs to go in all the different infractions, but then they need to teach you specifically, sit down with you about what goes in each of these columns, how to access. Now, as I said, it's not menu driven. It's not like a game, but it's menu driven. You got to know what buttons to click to go to the next place. Now, I'm not asking them to train you now, but you need to see the entirety of this. Let's see how many pages this thing is. Good Lord. 50 pages long. This is the training manual, 50 pages long. And so the notion here is you need to understand that how hard and how long it's going to be to learn all this, so that when you're interviewing and they ask you what your weaknesses are always situational. They're always technology. They're always experience based, that you can say, yeah, I know I'm going to need to get up to speed. I'm going to go get trained immediately on how to enter data in. Now, your strengths are always things that won't change. Like, I'm honest, I'm hardworking, I'm dedicated, those kinds of things. They're dispositional. Your weaknesses are always experiential, things that you can fix with experience and practice and training. This is one of those things that you need to acknowledge. And when you're interviewing, that, you need to be able to say, I'm NESIS trained and I can do teacher evaluations, or I'm not. But I know I need to get trained quickly so I can help with teacher observations. And the other is, yes, I've been Power School trained for incident reporting, or I haven't, but I know I've got to, and I understand the depth and totality of that, so that you can speak to the things that you don't do. You got to be honest. If they hire you and you can't do and aren't certified to do observations, and they got to wait for you to get done, they're not going to be happy with you, because if somebody else's observations go on, folks. There's a schedule, for BTs, first year teachers, second year, the whole deal. If you can't hold up your end of the bargain, then you better let somebody know before they hire you. Same thing with disciplinary data. If you've not been trained and signed off by your district to use the disciplinary data module in Power School, you're not going to sit down with a manual in your lap and figure it out and get up to speed in a minute or two. I'm just going to tell you. You can see this is the training manual. It's 50 pages long with pictures. It is not easy. It is so easy to make a mistake. That can cost you your job. It's not one of those things that you fly by the seat of your pants, press random buttons, and hope. No. Remember, there's money tied to this. A lot of it. You get this wrong, your district has to revert money back. That will not go well. If you cost them money, it will not go well for you. So you've got to understand. It's going to be your responsibility. And the manual says, regardless, the principal's ultimately responsible. So they're not going to turn you loose until they're confident that you're not going to cost them their job because you overstated your ability. When I teach doctoral research, which is pretty much every day, working with doctoral students, even teaching methodology, statistics, the first thing I teach them is the least reliable form of data is self-report. Don't get caught up on that. Principals understand that. If you can't do it, you better tell them. If you need help, you better tell them. Don't be one of them. Well, if I get the job, then I'll work. No. If you don't know how, you better tell them up front. If that factors in their decision, it just does. But you can get yourself in a lot of trouble legally if you don't know how to do this stuff. And again, it's not simple. It's not quick. It is not easy. Due process is not simple, quick, or easy. Actually, loading it into the system is not simple, quick, or easy either. That's part of it too. Now, once you get up to speed, it goes pretty fast, but you got to get up to speed. And if you've not been trained and signed off on, you better do that. I can't say that enough times. I'm being redundant, but I can't tell you the number of folks that didn't get out of their first year as AP because they thought they could wing it. Will not happen. Will not happen. All right, so that's what you got to do. All right, so let's talk about what do we put in there. Let me move this out of the way. What do we put in there? I've already showed you that one. All right, so here's your disciplinary data reporting manual. All right, and it has everything that you're supposed to do in it. I mean, it goes right down the line. Best practices, the value, reminding you that this is the way we capture data for the Office of Civil Rights now since 2014. So not only if you don't do it right are you breaking state law, you're now breaking federal law if you get this wrong. Let me say that again. Since 2014, Power School is the data collection vehicle for the Office of Civil Rights reports that all schools have to do every year. So if you get it wrong, and the OCR says we want to know everything. Again, no major, no minor. So when you start editing out those what you can, minor infraction with Educator's Handbook, you're violating federal law. OCR says we want everything. Everything. Authority to report disciplinary data, what must be reported, publicly available reports, best practices, terminology, behavior categories. I mean, it's got it all. And this goes with that state law that says you have to make reports to law enforcement and the superintendent. That means you got to put it in here, and then all the reporting laws on putting it in Power School. Liz has got a question.
Yeah, so I hear you say that you have to report it all, and the minor incidents and the major incidents. So if we use Educator's Handbook, does that mean an AP has to go and enter every single one of those into Power School separately?
No, it's third-party software. It just downloads automatically.
Okay, I thought I heard you
But
say
it's
something.
amazing how many times somebody forgets to do that.
Somebody forgets to
Download it from
Oh.
Educator Handbook into Power School.
Okay, so somebody manually has to do that
Yes,
part of
ma'am.
it.
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of like when we have you remember when I had you build your competency folio separately? And so that you could work in it and sandbox and add all different stuff and do all, you could put stuff in, put stuff out and do all that. And then, but at the end, you've got to upload it into your DRF portfolio and that finalizes it. Educator's Handbook is third-party software, and it's exactly the same way. It has a
So,
lot more flexibility. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot easier,
so
but
how
it has
often,
to be downloaded into PowerSchool.
how often? Like weekly, monthly?
Weekly. I would
Week-
do it weekly. Now, I know some people say we don't have to do that to the end of the year. Data updates daily. I would definitely do it. I would want to do it. I would want to do it every Friday afternoon. But I think legally, if you don't do it at least once a month, then you'd be out of compliance on the funding cycle. Remember, how often are schools funded? They're funded monthly, right? And what do we subtract from the state subtract from the money they give us? Attendance, suspensions, out of school suspensions, all those kinds of things have to be reported. It's supposed to be 24/48. But I would do it weekly from Educator's Handbook, and if but I think you'd get in trouble if you didn't do it at least monthly. I think a case could be made that you're being non-compliant and you're probably getting money you're not supposed to. So that's a great question. Yeah, you can use third-party software. And it says that right here in the handbook. It tells, it gives you the legal chain of command here of all the reporting authorities and why you have to do that. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, who wrote this manual, is responsible for creating procedures and complying with statutory requirements, carrying out school board policy, state school board, and the General Assembly. And also needed to produce reports for the federal government. As I said, OCR is now embedded in this as well. So you can see it's state law, federal law, and local board policy that you have to do this stuff. State law in the State Board of Education and the General Assembly. All those things, PSU, PowerSchool, study, insubordination, and right here's, and it gives you the legal authority on why you have to do this. General Statute 115C 1221. See, that's the General Assembly. That's state law. That's what I'm talking about. You got to satisfy the General Assembly who passes these general statutes, the state board who passes law and policy, and then the local board. All these right here. See right here, 115C 288. Here's State Board of Education policy right here. Now, before you ask, it's the same in South Carolina. Right here, 9 of these offenses must be reported or considered persistently dangerous. A high rate of these dangerous acts committed over a 2-year school being designated persistently dangerous is 2 dangerous acts in a ratio of 5 per 1,000. So that's 0.5. That's 0.05%, half of 1%. You get 5 per 1,000. That would be 1 for every 200 kids with a minimum threshold of 2. Remember, that goes back to No Child Left Behind, said you don't have to go to low performing academic schools and you don't have to go to persistently dangerous. It tells you right here what your calculation is. And here are the 9 that count against you. I've already explained that to you. This is part of the reporting. Now, you have to report more than just those 9 acts of violence. You have to report the other 8 acts of crime as well, for a total of 17, plus any reportable offenses that are just violations of law, and they have all these other categories as well. Now, what I have done for you, I have pulled out a little handy dandy for you, as I normally do. It's in under this, what must be reported, right here. There's your persistently dangerous ones. There's your reportable offenses ones right there. Those are the ones you got to call the law. They got to go in there. Right here, and I've summarized 2014 Department of Public Instruction took over Office of Civil Rights reporting right here. They want it all. Right there, it says that procedures reporting the incidents, what must be reported to law enforcement, what must be reported to DPI, everything. You see that list right there? Regardless of consequences, we don't care. With punishment, that's an outcome. We report incidents. Right there's everything that has to be reported in schools. It has to go into Power School. You see anything on there that you can say that, well, a kid could do this and not nothing? Everything's got to be reported. I pulled it all out in a handy dandy guide for you right here, straight out of this manual. Right there it is. I've summarized it all for you. If it happens in your school, you better have it documented, and it better be reported. All right, state board policy, Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education. Now they've got guidelines on all the Title IX stuff. So they're pulling Title IX stuff out. Office of Civil Rights is pulling out, but Title IX is also pulling out of this as well. See right here? Tells you what they want. Must be reported. There we go. All this stuff. Any aspect we're taking of zero tolerance policies. Remember last week we talked about zero tolerance? That's federal. If you do it, you got to tell it on yourself. Right there. They want to know. Seclusion and restraint. Now, these are illegal, zero tolerance and illegal seclusions and restraints. If your teacher ties a kid to the radiator, you got to report that. If they lock them in the closet, you got to report that. All these things happen pretty much regular. All these things have to be reported. Look, see this long list of stuff right here? Got to report who the victims are, the location. That's all the details that go in Power School. Publicly available. And see right here, it talks about the power of how you can use the data. For example, a principal may want to know what proportion of all school incidents resulted in a parent conference and in school or an out of school. So I said, you run it every Friday, and you know that. You don't wait to the end of the year and wonder how your statisticals are doing or if we're being consistent across the board if more than one person is processed in discipline. So, and even if it's just two of you, an AP and a principal, it doesn't have to be my situation where I had 6 APs and 2 admins, so I had 8 people processing discipline. Now, you better be meeting every Friday if you've got 8 processing discipline, I can tell you that. But even if you got 2, you need to meet anyway. Won't be a long meeting, but you need to be meeting. Yep, NC report card makes available to the public crime rates, bullying, harassment rates. That's what I'm talking about. Law enforcement, out of school. All this stuff comes out on your report card. Oh, yeah. Federal Office of Elementary and Secondary collects data through right here. Office of Civil Rights right there. Your Office of Special Education collects data out of Power School.
I have a question.
Yes.
If the data that is reported on the report card is different from what you see on the actual school data, is a discrepancy, how do you report that or you just let it be? Because when we had to put in our data for OMA 1 and going over the reports and what I pulled on the school report card, and then I got my AP to provide me what was in Power School from last year, the numbers were different.
Well, of course they were, because somebody was thumping the numbers. But you let that, the thing to do on that is you let that be. You're trying to learn what not to do.
Okay.
I was making the argument with one of the students the other day. Is some of the best training you'll ever have is to watch people do it badly. One of the problems, what the biggest problem with student teaching is we put student teachers with the very best teachers in the building, and student teachers don't even know there's such a thing as classroom management because it's just understood. They're with the best teachers who make it look, they don't even, that classroom management is not even a thing with them. But when they get their own classroom, they're just stumped. You know, these kids didn't. Why don't they come in and sit down and start their warm up activity like they did for Miss Lamb when we had her? I don't understand. Something's wrong with these kids. No, you were great teachers that had routines and reputations and worked hard on lessons, and you know they were that, and those student teachers never even got the opportunity to see what the real world was like. Now I look at it the same way. You know, if you're working for great administrators, they make it look so seamless, so easy. Everything's so good. It looks like the best job in the world. And a lot of times things happen because they always did, and you think they will for you. But the best training is to watch a struggling administrator or one that's dishonest and cheats, because it's easy to track the cheating part. That you get a good idea of what to do and not to do. So don't look at it as a deficit that you're at a place with poor administration. That's a great learning. You see it all. You see the things that can go wrong. But when you're with a great administrator, nothing ever goes wrong. You think it won't go wrong for you either. It didn't start out like that for them. They had to do a lot of hard work to get there. So, you know, that's one of them things. Don't poke it. You know, remember when you had a scab when you were a kid? What'd your mama tell you? Don't pick at it. That's good advice. Don't pick at it. 5 days. See right here, SB list that must be reported within 5 days. That's what I'm talking about. It's supposed to be every week. You know, your goal should be 24/48, but it has to be within 5 days. That's why I said I would download it every Friday. I think you'd get in trouble if you didn't have it in every month, and it caused money to be a discrepancy in the payout. Every 5 days. Supposed to be every Friday, you know, was always the rule with us. You got to know. And of course, right here, here's the bomb. Here's the one that everybody needs to read 2 or 3 times, regardless of who determines the data to enter and who enters the data. The principal is ultimately responsible for the disciplinary data, period. So you better tell them if you don't know how to do it, because their job is on the line if you get it wrong. They are ultimately responsible to either train you or have you trained, or the district to train you immediately so that you get it right, because they're on the line for it. Right there it is, not Dale's opinion. 5 days, it better be in there, and it better be right. Best practices as we go through this. And it tells you right down the line, be familiar with state and federal reporting requirements and reports. Review the discipline manual for guidance on how to enter and report your data. Know the definitions and rules for reporting behaviors, actions, and weapons. Now, when I designed the PD for new APs and principals in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, which it was a fruit basket turnover back in the 90s, into the 2000s with administrators as we kept changing superintendents, I just took this list right here and designed professional development around it. The big thing was to make a manual so you could they could have something to go back and refer to and look at the screen once they were no longer in the training sitting in front of a computer. But right down the line here, you build your training around this. Some of you are in districts big enough that they've got standard training on regular intervals, or somebody that does it. If not, you better figure out, you know, who's going to train me. You know, that would be part of if I didn't know and they brought it up, that'd be the first thing I'd want to know is I've not been trained. How'd that happen here? What are my steps? I want to get it done immediately, if not sooner. Right here. Here's the terminology. We organize around incidents. We can't make excuses like, well, we didn't suspend him, so we didn't have to put that in. We don't care about what the outcome or the action type is. We have to report incidents. Even if all we did was conference the kid, tell him quit that, don't do it anymore. Doesn't matter. We have to put it in there. And so again, persistently dangerous, reportable behavior, unacceptable UB, seclusions, restraint, and then non-disciplinary outside incidents D. Everything persistently dangerous, reportable offenses, 5 days. That's why you work on 24/48. You want it in there in 2 days if you can get it. You don't want to be outside that 5-day window. You can lose your job if you're outside that 5-day window. Within 5 days, it better be there. So you better hop to it, getting it processed. There's your reportable offenses, and there's your persistently dangerous on the left. You see all of this. Again, I pulled all this stuff out for you in a handy dandy guide. General guidance. We report an incident regardless of the identity of the offender. So I had an AP at a middle school. Kept having knives on campus, but none of them were getting reported. And I went up and said, Jamie, why are you not reporting all these knives on campus? I'm getting calls from school teachers that, you got knives on campus. Why you? Well, we don't know whose they are. That has nothing to do with it. Regardless of the identity, even if you don't know, you just put in unknown. I said, that's why you have that choice right here on the offender type. One of the choices is unknown. You're editing your data. Well, you're making your school unsafe to the point that teachers are calling me. That has to stop. That pretending you don't know who it is, you let them throw it down on the ground, and then you get the knife, and everybody knows they had a knife, but you not reporting it because you claim you don't know who had it. That has nothing to do with reporting it. Another common one is somebody comes on campus and does something on your campus after school or on a weekend, and you say, I don't have to report that. School, if it's on your campus, I don't care if it's night, day, middle of the night, you have to report it. Well, but they want us, it doesn't matter. There's more offender types than just students. Sometimes teachers are the offender. Sometimes parents are. Sometimes they're unknown. Sometimes it's community members. If it happens at your building, you have to report it, period. Nights, weekends, holidays, I don't care. It says so right here. Yep. Yep. July 1 to June 30 of every year on school grounds. You see what it says right there? From July 1 to June 30 of every year on school grounds or school-related field trip. Even you have to report what happened when the DECA crowd goes to Atlanta and stays at the Omni for the DECA convention. They all get drunked up and have booze in their room, as they do every year. You have to report that. All disciplinary incidents require a reporter, an offender, a behavior, and an action, even if the offender of the action is unknown or undetermined. You can't use that as an excuse. Incidents with more than one offender, you got to put them all in there. Don't say, well, I put one in there and I didn't want to put 2 or 3 because it would count almost 2 or 3 times. Well, yeah, it will. But if 3 were involved in there, better be 3 reports. Student from another school, more than one behavior. They brought a gun and threatened somebody with it, or brought a gun and shot somebody with it. That would be 2. And don't bury the lead. Don't put the minor one in first and then behind it hide the weapon. Don't do that. The most serious one is the first one you enter. All kinds of stuff here. Now, somewhere in here, I'm not going to sit and read this whole thing to you. We need to get moving on. It has all the procedures, system rules, all those things, required fields, incident type, location, incident numbers, submitting data to DPI. It's done automatically. Final approval, end of year, expungement of student disciplinary records. It has the rules on that. State report, incident detail view. Oh gosh, this is all the stuff. Here's what a report looks like. additional reports that you can run, guidance on entering participants in an incident, how it gives you all of these things here, all of these scenarios. Good stuff, good stuff. Now, somewhere in here, it will talk about third-party software that Liz asked about. You can use it, but you have to download it. You should do it every week. Category, multiple behaviors, violent crimes and definitions. I told you that you should know, you shouldn't get it wrong on what you classify because it's down to embarrassing detail here on defining all these offenses. All right. All that, everything you can think of is covered in the scenarios. Cyberbullying. Right here, it's got cyberbullying law right there for you. So I've had administrators say, well, that law was repealed. No, it wasn't. Don't be dumb. The only part of the cyberbullying law that was repealed was the Twitter war deal. If Brandon and I are in a Twitter war and he starts whipping me, I can't claim I've been bullied. That's the only thing that came out of it, is because Twitter wars got to be such a big thing. They finally had to address that. Other than that, right here is the law. Cyberbullying is against the law. Right there it is. And you have to deal with it if it is likely to, does or likely to disrupt the educational environment. Right there it is. Yeah. All right. Gang activity, harassment. Oh gosh. It's got alternative school stuff in here as well, reporting assaults. Gosh, it's got everything. That's what I'm talking about. Why do you think the manual is 50 pages long that covers how to do all this stuff? This is not quick and dirty, folks. Federal reporting requirements, exclusion and restraint. If somebody does something wrong, state impermissible uses of seclusion and restraint, tells you about all that. You put them in a chokehold, can't use a chokehold anymore. That used to be one of my favorites, by the way. I hate to say that, but pretty effective. Can't use that one anymore on restraint. I'd let the air off before they completely blacked out, just till they went limp, quit hitting you, fighting you. But can't do that anymore. We used to do that. I'm not kidding. We used to do that. We used to put chokeholds on. Can't do that anymore. Well, they'll get you. And so, gosh, everything that you could think of about discipline is in this manual. Reporting zero tolerance expulsions. There you go. That's illegal. Yep, can't do that. If you do it, you got to report it, and somebody's going to lose their job over it, by the way. Somebody's going to, an illegal exclusion, restraint, or zero tolerance, somebody will lose their job because that's federal. And you got to report it. And you got to tell what you did to that person who did it as well. Oh my, detentions. And reporting other action. Yeah, you can't don't put, I finally have made a rule across the board in CMS. There is no time when it's another. If you don't know what it is, call me on my cell phone, but I better not see any others. Guess what all the others were? They were always reportable offenses or persistently dangerous. So rule in CMS, I hope they still got it. You can't use other. In terms of the incident type, guidance for victims, when you have victims, oh my. Early childhood settings. One of the worst cases I ever had was primary age kids, kindergarten and first. So yes, they get disciplined too. And here's all your terms. Here's all your codes. Here's all the things, the behavior types that have to be reported right here. There's nothing that's not on this list, by the way. Right there they are. And all the different action types, again, supervised activity, expulsion, corporal punishment. Just a conference. You conference a kid, it's got to go in there. If there's a referral, it must go in to power school. Kinds of stuff. Now, to finish up here for tonight, as I said, we're going to talk about bullying and cyber and those kinds of issues. Let's see. One of the worst mistakes that we make in the school business is thinking that persistently dangerous incidents are random, just bad luck on our part. Folks, they are not random. Let me say that again. Persistently dangerous incidents, acts of violence, are not random. What they are is little things that got out of that were not addressed, and they became the big things. We call that antecedent behaviors, or the criminologists do. So in 2011, which would be how many years ago? 13 years ago, I retired that year, and my reward was to be the keynote speaker at the state conference at Curry in Greensboro. I told you the story before. And this was the presentation that I did. I hired a criminologist and we put this together. Identification of antecedent behaviors and development of prevention strategies to assist schools in decreasing violent acts on their campuses. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So the thesis behind this presentation is there are certain little things that if you leave them alone and don't act, remember you had a duty to act. Remember nonfeasance? You had a duty to act and you didn't. You let these little things keep on going that are infractions that are in the handbook, not supposed to do them, that they will become the big things, the violent acts. Now, again, it's 13 years old. Let's see how prescient I was 13 years ago. What was my read on the future of where we were headed and the things that were going to keep on getting us in trouble if we didn't deal with them? Let's see what I said it would be. Gang activity, bullying, cyberbullying, sexual harassment, and sexting, or using social media for sexual means. How close was I? You realize that nobody had ever even heard of cyberbullying at the time I made this. There was no cyberbullying law on the book. How did I know this? Do I appear that smart to you? I ran my data in Power School for the entire district, the largest school district in the state. I ran regression analysis, and what did it tell me? It told me what the future was going to be. That's the power of reporting and keeping up with your data. I did it at the macro level for the largest district in the state, and with DPI for all of their data. Ken Gaddis gave me all of their data, and I ran it. And I can tell you what causes the little things that cause the big things. I can tell you where we were headed because I looked at my numbers. I ran the reports and I paid attention. The metaphor for you is every Friday, what do you need to be doing? You need to be running your reports and paying attention every Friday to what's going on, seeing the trends and the patterns in your school. It's almost like a crystal ball. You can see the future if you will bother to. But now, it only works if you do what? Enter your data in on a regular basis, 24. Why do I say 24/48? And the state says 5 days? Because then we're always a week behind. I want to know this Friday what's going on so I can plan for next week. I don't want my data 2 weeks out. I want to have a plan when we hit the parking lot on Monday morning. I want to have a plan. We didn't do a good job last week. We had too many discipline incidents. We had too many violent things. We had too many fill in the blank. Let's address that this week. Let's not let it get out of control. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's what we're talking about here. What is the culture in your building? What is the culture in your building? You can track your data. You know what it is. And the last thing tonight, thank you for being with me. Please remember that your code of conduct for your district sets the punishments. You have some leeway there. But you don't have any leeway. You don't have any discretion on whether you report them or not. You have discretion on the punishment that you give, not that you give, not that you report it. That's where the discretion comes in, is with that code of conduct, not with the state reporting manual. You will report that stuff, and if you get caught not, you'll lose your job because the principal will fire you, because guess who's ultimately responsible? And if they don't fire you, where does the axe fall on them? The law says so. You can't get behind, not just because of, but you can't get behind because your data's not real time. You don't know what's going on in your building. You got to know what's happening. You got to have a plan every week. Every week you need a plan based on your numbers every week. Don't you have an instructional plan? Don't you have pacing guides on the academic side? This is your pacing guide and planning on the other side, on the disciplinary side. There's two sides to the school business, academic and operation. You got to have a plan on the operation side. That's what this course is about. You had academics last semester. This semester, you're having operation. Just like you did a data dive on your test scores, you got to do a data dive on your disciplinary data. And you got to make a plan every week. 24/48. Otherwise, your data isn't any good. It's too far out. It's too old. That's the way it goes. Questions you have for me tonight? Are you thoroughly scared with the totality, or not scared? Are you concerned about how big a job it is entering discipline in? It is a huge job. I'm not, that's why you got to slow down and get it right, because you got to go make sure you've gone through everything that you need to do. Now you'll get better at it as you go, but there is no quick way to process discipline other than just send them back to the room, and that will not go well for you. All right, we had a question. Brandon, did you have your hand up?
Just real quick, I just wanted to go back to when you was talking about the interview process. So like some people that's already like getting like in the leadership position, but like for me coming out of the classroom, and if I'm like my principal is not very supportive of the situation that I'm in. So when I do complete the program and I do try to go on interviews, will it be very difficult for me for somebody to probably offer me a job as an AP, knowing I don't have any experience in some of the areas that you're telling me about?
Well, I'll just tell you, somebody that hired a lot of people. I prefer people with no experience to bad experience. So that's not a disqualifier. I'd a lot rather have a new person that I can teach the right way. But now you can help yourself by understanding. You need to be able to disaggregate a report card. You need to be able to look at standardized test scores. You need to be able to know that manual that I just showed you, that 140 pages from back to front to back. I mean, if you know that manual where you can get up to speed and they can train you quickly, no, it won't keep you from getting a job. If you can get somebody to show you at your school or another school what you're getting yourself into. But now I'll guarantee you, if you know that manual front to back, it'll be better than anybody else probably in that building. And you can get up to speed quickly. I mean, you can overcome your inexperience. You can't overcome bad training or bad behavior or bad ethics. You can't overcome those. I mean, if you're willing to work, you can overcome those. And yes, I much prefer somebody with no experience to bad experience. I hate people with bad experience, because I've got to break them of the bad habits first before I can train them what they really need to do. That notion of that our first impulse is always to hide everything or lie about it. Oh, can't get people out of that. It becomes ingrained, because some places they lie when they don't have to, because it's just habit. That's just who they are. Cover up, lie, figure a way to thump the numbers. I do not want those people. I don't want to have to watch you all day, every day, and do my job too. If I have to be there with you all day, I don't need you. I have to be able to trust that when I tell you to go do X, Y, and Z, you'll go do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, you'll ask me, and I'll show you how to do X, Y, and Z. But not that you will go and cheat, or that you'll go and not do it because you don't know how, and you didn't tell me you didn't know how. and it doesn't get done, and it stacks up and you start hiding it or thinking it'll go away. No, neither of those will happen. So, Brandon, you're not in a unique situation. Most of our students are kind of like you. They're coming out of the classroom for that first job. But if you're honest with people about, I'm a fast learner, I'm a hard worker, I'll get up to speed, I do know the manual, I do understand the process, then that makes up for a lot. If you walked into an interview and told me you'd read that manual and I asked you 2 or 3 questions about it and you could answer those questions, I wouldn't have any trouble hiring you if that based on that. Now, EC is a different story. I'm just going to have to put up with the fact that most people who come in are not going to be very good at EC. But there's no excuse for not being good at disciplinary data, because the manual, it's completely self-explanatory. Now, you know how hard EC is. EC changes from week to week, from kid to kid, because it's individualized. You cannot have the same knowledge base built for EC as you do. There's no excuse to not knowing disciplinary data. I mean, zero excuse. I mean, the definitions of the instance are embarrassingly to the point. You can't get that wrong other than you just shortcutted, quick, didn't care, just trying to get through, trying to hide something. If you can read and comprehend, you can be an expert at discipline the first time you sit down to enter it. But you can't do that with EC. It's just, I wish it was that easy with EC. So, when we hire new people, and we just have to put up with the fact that we're going to have to get them up to speed as being the LEA rep, the person that sits in we're going to have to work with them on that. And it's going to come with experience. And one of the things that, when Dr. Sane works with me when we cover this, is he say, you can't be afraid to stop the meeting, postpone the meeting, and go find out. That's part of it as a young LEA rep. You just can't know every scenario. And it's not written down like it is for disciplinary data. It's all a negotiation at that point. None of it's a negotiation on disciplinary data. It's black and white as it gets in our business, folks. You won't have anything else that is just cut and dry as that is. But it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. The manual is 140 pages long. The training manual for that manual is 50 pages long. But it's a lot of pictures. That helps. But yeah, this is a monumental task, but you got to get it right. It is monumental. And you saw it's all legaled up on you. There's no wiggle room. The feds have got you with several laws. The states got you with several laws. General Assembly, school board. I mean, there is no out on this one, folks. OCR, Office of Civil Rights. It's not like you can say I didn't know or it was a gray area. No, It's just as plain as his nose on my face. And if you acknowledge that up front, then you realize that there's no shortcuts. Then you'll just sit down, buckle down, and learn it. And then after that, it's easy. But if you think, well, I don't really have to, or there's a way, there is no way around this. There is no plan. There's no alternative, or either this. There is no door number 2 or door number 3 here. That's one of my favorite stories in teaching probability is the Monty Hall 3-door theory. Y'all not old enough to remember Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall. Wayne Brady does that now, doesn't he? But it's about probability. But there is no door number 2 or door number 3 in disciplinary data. There's only one door. This is the manual. You will do it this way or else. It's a lot, but once you get it, it'll go well for you. Other questions? That's a good question. I like that one, Brandon. All right. As always, I appreciate you joining me. Your work is good. Just stay after it. It's about time to get to task 4. what we'd like to do, as I told you, I'd like for us to run quickly through the OMA and SCIF and get you to the CAP before the end of the semester, so that you won't have but one evidence to do this summer when you're putting in your portfolios and everything together. Boy, summer school has gotten so short. So short. They wait a week, another week to start, and man, the only way that we can, we got to push it in order to get that week of July 4th off. I hate to make people come on the 4th of July. So if we can roll into the CAP before the end of the semester, we're in good shape. What catches us, and I'll say this and be done. What catches us on the CAP is if we wait too late till summer to do it, everybody's gone home for the year, and we can't do the teacher interview part. There's a qualitative piece to the CAP where you have to go out and talk with teachers. If you let them go home, or if you let them get into testing before you can do that. Now, one of the things is, during testing, we don't survey or interview. We made, DPI promises principals that when we put interns in their school, hence you, that we won't do interviews or surveys during testing. That we'll leave teachers alone. So you subtract back from the end of school 2 weeks, for testing. We can't do interviews or surveys after that time. So that's why I said we really need to make sure that we've got task 2 of the CAP done by second week in May at the latest. That's when summer school starts. So we really need to get there this spring, and we don't want to, Brandon, especially, I hate to point this out, but in schools, especially where administrators may not be the most supportive, we definitely don't want to do this. They tend to make a big deal out of it sometimes. So, yeah. So keep chugging out those tasks, right? Again, right half of the competencies for task 4. I don't care which half, and let's keep rolling. We're going to roll next week. What are we doing next week? Let's look at our schedule. Yep. Next week, we're talking about technology, and we'll talk about our case study next week as well, and get you prepped for the following week. That was my plan. Yeah. So technology, cyber, as I told you earlier, the case study comes the following week. So next week, we'll talk about our case study. I'll also talk to you about the skip next week to get you ready to start it. Yep. Submit file. Yep. We're moving to 4. We're trying to get a week ahead. So I'll talk about the skip next week. I'll talk about the case study next week. So don't let me slow you down. Keep rolling. All right. It's good to see everybody this week. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next Tuesday. Have a good evening. Thank you again.